BBC News, hello, I'm Gareth Barlow. Canadian police say one of the suspects in a mass stabbing in Saskatchewan, Damien Sanderson, has been found dead. Jessica Murphy reports.
Police in Saskatchewan say that Damien Sanderson's body was found in a grassy area near a house being investigated by police in the small Indigenous community of James Smith Cree Nation. They said there were visible injuries on the body that did not appear self-inflicted. Police say that Miles Sanderson may also be injured and confirmed he has a long criminal record dating back years. He remains at large and police are asking the public to remain careful and vigilant.
The two brothers had been charged with murdering 10 people and wounding at least 18 others in a stabbing spree on Sunday. Their motive is still unknown. The Canadian Prime Minister said such violence had no place in the country. A US judge has granted Donald Trump's request for the appointment of an official called a special master to review the classified material seized during last month's unprecedented FBI search of his Florida home. It's a partial legal victory for the former president, who's argued that much of the material was either his own or subject to executive privilege. It's unclear if the Justice Department will appeal. Mr. Trump accuses it of conducting a political witch hunt. Gary O'Donoghue reports.
For the time being, pending a review of the material by the court's special master, the government cannot continue to use it for purposes of the investigation. However, the material can be examined by intelligence officials who are conducting a review of the possible damage done to national security. It's not clear how long the special master's review will take, but it unquestionably complicates matters for the Department of Justice and delays the bringing of any potential charges.
Ukraine says it's disconnected the last working reactor at the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from the national grid. It says it's to fight a fire caused by Russian shelling that's affected the remaining transmission line from the plant. Moscow denies any bombardment. The UN nuclear watchdog said the reactor was still providing power to keep the facilities safe, though a continuous external backup supply is internationally mandated. President Zelensky said cutting Zaporizhzhia off from the grid again placed it a step away from a radiation catastrophe, and he blamed Russia again for the problems.
Ukraine
has a very clear, transparent and honest position. While we controlled the plant, there was no threat of a radiation disaster. As soon as Russia came, the worst scenario imaginable immediately became possible. This requires an international response, from the UN to every normal state.
Ukraine has told the IAEA the disconnected power line will be reconnected once the fire is put out. World News from the BBC. Liz Truss has been voted leader of Britain's Conservative Party and faces immediate pressure to tackle an economic crisis as she becomes Prime Minister on Tuesday. Ms Truss faces many challenges. Britain is predicted to enter recession and has the highest inflation rate among G7 countries. Here's Rob Watson on how she'll tackle those problems.
Perhaps the best way to explain it is what she's outlined is what might be called a 2022 version of Reaganomics. Like former President Reagan, she's very much in favour of that idea of you cut taxes, you deregulate, a sort of form of trickle-down economics, and I think she genuinely believes in that. Now, of course, her critics would say that Britain is already pretty low tax, it doesn't really need unfunded tax cuts, and it doesn't really need deregulation, but I think that is what she has in mind in broad terms.
The Supreme Court in Brazil has imposed temporary restrictions on the purchase of guns, citing the risk of political violence ahead of next month's election. The decision suspends several decrees from the right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro that made it easier for Brazilians to get firearms. People now have to demonstrate a clear need if they want to buy guns and ammunition. The Islamic State group said it carried out the suicide bombing outside the Russian embassy in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Monday's blast killed 2 Russian staff and 4 local people. In a statement, IS said the bomber triggered his suicide belt, but an Afghan official earlier said it was detonated by shots that killed the bomber. Russia is one of the few countries to have an embassy in Kabul after the Taliban seized power last year. And the authorities in Burkina Faso say at least 35 civilians have been killed by a bomb that hit a convoy of vehicles in the north of the country, where jihadist rebels are active. Dozens of others were wounded in the blast that took place on the road between Djibo and Bourjanga. Live from London, you're listening to the latest world news from the BBC.